What's up, skeptics? Welcome to another episode of Reason to Doubt, your source for all things skeptical. I'm Jordan, joined with Jared. And again, for like the fourth time in a row, we've got a very special guest. We have Vishanti on with us. How's it going?
It is going. I'm here. I am fighting off some butterflies, which is weird because I'm on live streams quite a bit, and you would think that I'm used to this by now, but I think it's different because I'm more or less the center of attention, so I'm getting all
Plus, there
freaked
probably
out.
aren't as many bow ties on the other streams, which, that elevates the standard.
That's true. Yes, there are like long ties, but there aren't bow ties, so maybe that's it.
And
It's
long
throwing off
ties
my
are
chi.
just objectively inferior to bow ties.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
It's okay. We all know what the right answer is. So today we are going to be talking about anti-Semitism. And so in America, which is where I'm from and where Jared's from, a great many atheists were former Christians in our previous life, or we were raised in a culture that is dominated by Christianity. And as a result, I think very often we take the viewpoints that we got from our upbringing and bring them over with us into atheism, perhaps unexamined. And that can lead to us inheriting a lot of preconceptions and biases. And one of the ways in which that manifests is in atheist interactions with Judaism. This is a topic I've been wanting to talk about for a little while, and you were also planning on talking about this topic. So I'm really glad you could join us. So in case anybody in the chat doesn't know you or who you are, why don't you introduce yourself briefly?
All right. Well, hi. I'm Vishanti. You might have seen me around. I help content creators like Paulogia and Dapper Dinosaur moderate their side chat. And then I do collaborations with Dapper and people like Fossil Daddy. Subscribe to both of them. And I grew up in the Deep South in Alabama. It's like the buckle of the Bible Belt. And I have a very eccentric family history. My mom was raised Catholic. My dad was the son of a holiness preacher. Mom left Catholicism for like a non-denominational branch of Christianity when I was a kid, and she kind of raised me that way. And I somehow ended up at a Southern Baptist church when I was about to graduate high school. I say somehow, it's because I had a crush on a guy. And I started going there because of him, and
that's why everyone goes to a church when they're teenagers.
Yeah,
and you gotta make sure if you're a
like
guy, you carry the
17,
15 the chairs. You have to carry extra chairs to impress all the women. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so that's where I went for a while, and then I became like a born again evangelical, and then I eventually kind of became drawn to Judaism and did a tour in the Messianic movement for a while, and I came to my senses and converted officially to Judaism a few years ago. So it's probably going to be a little hard to pin me down as a strict atheist or agnostic, but you know what? I don't really mind about labels. If you want to think of me as an atheist or agnostic, go for it.
But are you an agnostic atheist?
Possibly. That's a mystery. Even I don't know that sometimes, so. Yeah.
So the topic that we're going to be addressing today, we're going to be throwing around a lot of labels. Christianity, Judaism. We want to say ahead of time that Christianity is a massively diverse religion with a lot of different viewpoints in it. Judaism is also not a monolithic religion. There are a variety of viewpoints in both, and not all atheists believe the things or say the things we're going to be talking about. So if we say this is the Christian viewpoint, we're probably most likely talking about like a fundamentalist Christian viewpoint that's common in America. But if we say that atheists think X and you don't think X, well, then we're not talking about you. So,
yeah, exactly. Religions are internally diverse,
right?
So,
but if we are talking about you,
I'll try to clarify as we go. I'm not going to specifically call out a lot of Christian doctrine because this is really not what that's about. It's mostly about where, the deconstruction process overlaps, other types of dialogue. So. Yeah, I'm not going to be talking about the Trinity or, the nature of Jesus's incarnation or anything. It's not really my purview.
So when we say anti-Semitism, what are we talking about? What is anti-Semitism?
Okay,
what is anti-Semitism?
Anti-Semitism, it was developed as a term, a very clunky term, to make the word Judenhass or Jew hate seem more palatable to an audience using like vaguely academic terms. And it takes its phrasing from 19th century just race-based junk science. If you talk to any academics, they'll let you know Semitic is a language group. It is not a people. It's not an ethnicity. You're not going to, walk over to your neighbor's house and find a Semite. So it's one of those clunky terms that I kind of hate using, but we're stuck with it for now. So we'll work with it.
So a lot of atheists might be thinking, well, this can't possibly apply to me because I'm not anti-Semitic. I love Jewish people. I have Jewish friends. I can't possibly have anti-Semitic ideas. So there's a meme that I think really kind of encapsulates the entire thesis of this this entire stream, which is this is this is the situation that's very often happening. You have anti-theists who are very angry and want to throw rocks or dodgeballs at Christianity, and somehow every time they throw a rock, it lands it just hits a Jewish person right in the face every time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely one of those things. You can almost hear it anytime someone starts typing their responses on the internet. You could just hear the ow, ow, ah, from people getting whacked with a dodgeball. And, there's a lot of atheists in the West, especially, that used to be Christians. So, it's natural that they want to kind of wind up and hit that group. I mean, there's a lot of unhealed trauma there. There's resentment there. And I can relate. I went through a lot of anger and frustration because Christianity can be toxic. It's intractable a lot of the time. It needs to be dragged kicking and screaming into, modern age moralities and things like that. So I've been there. I can relate. But because those atheists tend to only have experience with Christianity, that kind of frames their whole view of religions broadly. So when they hurl that dodgeball, it ends up catching people in the crossfire. So you'll hear me use the term Christian atheist a lot, and I'm using that very specifically to refer to atheists who used to be Christians or who grew up and formed their ideas about religion in a Christian hegemony, like, America and Canada. Those Anglophone countries tend to be Christian hegemonies.
Growing up in the Christian church or many Christian churches, you are told that a lot about Judaism because you use the same books. Like, it's basically the same thing.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, so, that's one of those things you got to learn first, is that the Hebrew Bible and the Christian Old Testament are actually not the same thing. There is a variance in chapter numbering, in book selection, and in the order. So, yeah, if you only know about Judaism by reading the Christian version of the Bible, you don't know much.
Right. And you also, I think, tend to put a bunch of mindsets onto Judaism that are common and like completely normal and so normalized in Christianity, it seems like the only way to do it. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's natural to assume, well, when I believed in the Bible, I thought X. And that like X is the entirety of your biblical worldview. And so anyone who believes in the Bible, which in this view would include Jewish people, they must think so too. And that's not the case. So
also too, Jordan, sometimes when we deconstruct from our previous religions, we don't fully deconstruct. We bring some baggage along with us. So like we think we've gone through like all the closets, pulled out all the skeletons, but there's still pieces in there that we left over. So I think tonight's going to be useful for even myself to figure out, like, is there still some things in there that I'm holding with me that I've carried over that I haven't had a chance to look at and examine.
Yeah,
so
that's why I'm here. So
yeah,
because I mean, you're not trying to be bigoted. I really do try to assume good faith. When I'm listening to various atheists on their channels or podcasts, I can usually tell what kind of background they had by the way that they discuss religion broadly. And it's easy to pick out the fundamentalists. It's easy to pick out the people who used to be like a Catholic. It's good to pick out the people who were like, Paul Gio was Mennonite. So you can kind of sense common threads in the way that they discuss things. And, there's a lot of people out there who treat Judaism as Christianity minus the Jesus part. And that is extremely far from the truth. Right. So there's going to be some topics we're going to talk about, like And I want to focus a little on the difference between deconverting and deconstructing. Those are not the same thing. A lot of people use those interchangeably. Deconverting is basically you're not convinced anymore by whatever religious propositions you used to hold. You can't control what convinces you. But deconversion, there's an intentional process where you systematically examine the tenets, the frameworks, the mindsets, and you have to pull those apart. And it's frequently very uncomfortable, and you realize of a lot of blind spots along the way, but it definitely helps in a pluralistic sense to unpack those baggages so that you can have better dialogues. So,
and it's an iterative process. So to help along with that, what we're basically going to do, we're going to talk about some ideas that Christians and atheists who used to be Christians held themselves or often hold themselves that they put onto Judaism, which don't necessarily belong there. And once we've unpacked those, so maybe a little bit of education on what Jewish thought is like, we're going to be taking on some common tropes we've heard, even in the announcements for this very video, that are harmful, and explaining why they're harmful and why people should do better. So let's dive right into that. One of the first things that people, I think, tend to assume, anyone who is still religious or a person who believes this book is true, that they believe in univocality. And what that
big word.
Yeah, it is a big word. Univocality. So
found it out.
Right. So what it means is one voice. So the idea that the entire Bible is a cohesive whole written by different people over time, but all saying the same thing. That if you want to know what book A means, you can go to book B, and that they're going to always be saying the same things. They must be in harmony, which is a very common idea in fundamentalist Christianity. So what would be the Jewish viewpoint on that, or one of your viewpoint? Let's just go with you. What is your viewpoint?
Let's just go with me. Yeah,
well, I want you to be the spokesperson for every Jewish person ever alive.
No pressure.
Look, there's a reason that there's a saying, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. There's a saying like that for a reason. So we tried to make like a formula out of that and do it in like a proper equation, like Jews opinions equals n+1, and tried to see how that would scale. But univocality, that is such a big one. The Bible itself, and you can discuss this with academics who are in the field, it's a collection of multiple writings by multiple people over multiple generations with multiple end goals and multiple theologies. And there are several books in there that have multiple versions of the same narrative. There's this idea that there's one single view of things in the Bible, or the Bible says this, that's ahistorical, and it's frequently fallacious. And before someone starts, shouting, cherry picking, let me just clarify that everybody negotiates with the text. Every single person that reads it, no matter who you are, where you come from. It's literally impossible not to do that. Even if you want to get your theology from it, if you want to look at the biblical mandates, or if you want to look at laws. For one, there's no standing temple, so that one's right out. And the Jewish people themselves are largely in diaspora, and there are land-restricted instructions. Also, there are laws specifically for priests, or men, or women, or slaves, or animals, and no one person can hold those identities simultaneously. If you do that, I will be very afraid, because you're probably some eldritch being from beyond. And then there's like the issue that Judaism itself developed out of, polytheistic Canaanite cultures, and it wasn't monotheistic at first. It was probably polytheistic, maybe henotheistic or monolatrous over time. And so there's not even one single God view in the Bible at all. So univocality is right out.
And this is not necessarily, correct me if I'm wrong, but this isn't like out of step with Jewish thought. This isn't like some weird fringe view. Like some, if I stood up in a Southern Baptist church and said that, well, that would be a problem. But I feel like that wouldn't be a problem if it was brought up in a synagogue.
People would just kind of look at you and go, and?
Yeah.
What's your point? Are you going to finish whatever you were doing, or? Yeah, it wouldn't be like in a Southern Baptist church where you could like hear the air get sucked out of the room and just people,
Yeah. So
you know.
some woman dramatically faints. Yeah.
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 You just see fruit start flying out of nowhere, rotten lettuce.
Kind of similarly to that is the idea of literalism. Like the Bible is literally true, except for all the parts that aren't literally true. But
Yes, of
that the
course.
Bible, like if the flood of Noah happened exactly as described, Jonah was eaten by a big fish, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Everything in the Bible happened as described. And this is again, common view in particularly fundamentalist Christianity.
Yeah.
So are you telling me that Jewish people don't think that everything in the Bible happened exactly as described?
No. No.
What are you guys even doing then? Don't you
We
read
get
your own
this
book?
question a lot. Yes, actually, every day, or you know, depending on the cycle, you read through the entire like first 5 books once a year. So yeah, we read it a lot. So I won't have time to unpack the whole thing here, but Judaism's framework of textual interpretation basically goes like this. You start reading a text, and no matter how many mystical or homiletical interpretations you get out of that, whatever your conclusions are, they cannot contradict the plain meaning of the text. Now, I'm saying plain and not literal for a reason. It's not just idioms, you know, like when they say windows of heaven. The ancients did actually understand that literally to be, you know, windows in a dome above the flat earth. It was like, they call the firmament the rakia. So they did understand that literally. But it's basic linguistics and it's grammar. So the very first word of the Bible in the Torah is Bereshit. And English Bibles tend to translate that as in the beginning. And that's really not the best way to translate that word. Dan McClellan goes into a little bit more of this, and Dr. Josh and Dr. Kip have talked a lot about this particular word. But I think a more clear way to render that would give you a better sense of that setting would be to translate it as in the commencement of, or at the commencement of. So it's not in the beginning, it's when God started doing stuff. And you'll see a lot of Jewish translations of Genesis render it that way, when God began to create the heavens and the earth. So the plain reading of those first few chapters, it's, hey, this is the beginning of the 7-day work week. This is laying out, you know, a mythological origin of everything. But you have young earth creationists who paint themselves into a corner going, no, it's very literal. Those were exactly 6 24-hour days. And this is like in defiance of all known laws of science and logic. But they've assumed a conclusion and they've gone looking for evidence, and they have to start doing crazy gymnastics to try to make it fit. But then a few verses later, they switch over to, it's a metaphor, because even though they know there's not a flat earth and a dome with windows above it. So
but
even they can't be consistent.
The heavens, and that's like the Big Bang or whatever, you know.
I've heard that. Oh, it's so bad.
And so those two critiques that we just talked about, univocality and literalism, where they tend to get leveled at Judaism by atheists, is when they're combined and people will critique things that are in the Old Testament and basically challenge this Jewish person as to why they believe that's okay. So like, your text endorses slavery, you know, justify that. Like, why do you think slavery is okay? Or, you know, the God commanded genocide, and doesn't that mean you're worshiping an evil being or whatever? But I think we can see if the idea of univocality and literalism are not present in Judaism, then the answer would be like, oh, well, that didn't happen. Or, you know, or they were wrong. Like,
you know, disclaimer, there are certain branches of Judaism that trend towards more literal readings. Most of the time you're going to find those in Orthodox circles, but it's not like fundamentalist Christianity, even when they tend to drift that way. So yeah, when you talk about, you know, the dodgeball, a lot of Christians assume univocality, they assume, you know, literalism, but when convenient, it kind of undermines their critique because it lacks nuance. It lacks historical context. So, you had mentioned slavery. Josh Bowen just put out a 700-page book on how the Bible endorses slavery.
And if you want to hear about
700
that,
pages.
we did an episode with him last week. Go check that out.
Yes, exactly. And, the first almost half of the book is discussing that issue, and the back half of it is every other ancient Near Eastern law that has anything to do with slavery. So it's a one-stop shop. Yes, this was chill. Go buy the book. It's really good. But because the Bible endorses slavery, does that mean anybody who uses that book in their tradition endorses slavery? Joshua, the text of that commands, genocide and ethnic cleansing. Does that mean that anyone who uses Joshua in their tradition is fine with genocide? The penalty for causing a pregnant woman to miscarry is a property fine for her husband. Does that mean that anyone who uses that text must think of women as property? Like, no. The answer is no. Because that every single person in tradition have negotiated with text. So I was trying to find out a good way to help people understand this idea. And because a lot of the audience is probably American, or at least familiar with the way our cockamamie government works, the U.S. Constitution, this is a really good example. So if you look at Article 1, Section 2, Clause number 3, you will find the 3/5 compromise. Slaves were only counted as 3/5 of a person, so that the southern states, which owned slaves, would not have disproportionate representation in Congress. Yes, it is still in there. Does that mean that every American thinks that Black people are only 3/5 of a person? No. Your immediate answer should be, hey, we fought a whole ass war over this. The 14th Amendment came out of it. We decided, hey, slavery is actually not okay institutionally. Don't talk about prison. And the knowledge of that history and societal development and the struggle we went through to get, out of the system keeps you from making a stupid claim like, well, the 3/5 compromise is in your founding document and it's in your law book, so you must think that, all these other people are only 3/5 in person. That's ridiculous. But we do that to the biblical text, and it's a legal document in a lot of places. And I know that's unwelcome nuance, but every week, I've watched atheist call-in shows, I've listened to podcasts, and the hosts start doing that very thing. Like, they'll go, okay, they kind of sense that they're not getting anywhere with a caller, and they'll go, oh yeah, justify slavery, justify genocide, justify, bigotry, and all this other stuff. And it's like, you have no idea that these are two completely different tangents. It's very frustrating.
So if this is in the book that is a central part to your religion, and those parts are there, right? They are present in the text. Then how is it that that you aren't held to that? What is the process that has been done to move past that? Why is it that you don't feel beholden to slave laws?
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, that's the question you should be asking is, well, if it's in there, why aren't they doing it? That's a good question. Okay. For the chat, if you've played Uno, put a 1 in the chat. 1 for Uno. Because we're going to use Uno as a good example.
Kip Davis was concerned that the Canadians in the audience wouldn't understand, though we all know that you guys know what the American Constitution is.
That's okay. I got smoke for Canada too. It's coming. Y'all just hang in there. Okay, good. We're seeing a lot of 1s. All right, yeah. Uno's it's a wonderful rivalry game. It's ended friendships before, but this is a good meme that I found this week, where someone had brought up Uno, and I immediately went, this is Jewish coded. So this is the meme. The official Uno account. Yes, they have an official account. And they say you can't play a +2 on a +2. And the top reply here is, thank you for the cards, but we'll take it from here. And the commentary at the bottom is, hey, the only rules of Uno are what you can convince the rest of the table the rules are.
Because that's how rules
And I'm pretty sure that most of the people in the audience had no idea that there was a you can't play +2 on a +2 rule.
And
right?
so what is the parallel between this situation and Judaism?
I am so glad you asked that. Okay. So, before we circle back to the Uno meme, a little bit of context. Judaism and how it negotiates with the text. So Judaism is an ethno-religion that developed out of what was probably a loose confederation of various Canaanite tribes. And initially, it was centered around temple worship of like a regional god or gods, and it drifted more towards monotheism, as the Hellenistic period approached. There were some leaps forward under Josiah and various things, but after the Second Temple was destroyed by the Romans in the year 70, Judaism had a very important decision to make. They had to adapt or go extinct. And the rabbis called a huddle and said, hey, everybody take a knee. We don't have a temple. This is a problem. How do we be Jews without a temple? So what they decided was, hey, let's formulate Judaism for diaspora. Let's center it around the home instead of around a building, because we don't have that building anymore. And there was really only one sect of Second Temple Judaism that survived after, the Romans just wrecked the place. And that was the Pharisees. The Sadducees were largely tied to the monarchy and things like that. So they didn't last very long without a temple because that was their job. And the rabbis just kind of made, Judaism 2.0. And our identity was no longer centered around a geographical plot of land and a physical building. And that center of cult worship just decided to go with the people. And that's what they did. They're like, we're going to make Judaism portable. You can be a Jew anywhere. So the Hebrew Bible is one of our texts. And, you've heard of the Talmud probably. There are various legal codes like the Shulchan Aruch. And unlike fundamentalist Christianity, the Bible is the starting point of our discourse. It is not the finish line. So if you try to hit up a Jew and go, yeah, well, the Bible says, they're just going to look at you and go, yeah, but the rest of the commentaries that we have say, da-da-da-da-da. So you really have to ditch the univocal thing and you have to ditch the literalism thing, because there's a process of, well, hey, why don't we do this thing? Judaism's constantly evolving. There are things that are morally unacceptable in the biblical text, like full stop. You can't justify slavery. You can't justify genocide. You can't justify bigotry or homophobia or patriarchy and sexism and stuff like that. That's unacceptable. So when you look at the text, which is one of the ways that you have formed your identity, you have to decide, is this who we want to be? And there have been many times in the history of Judaism where we've looked at the text and gone, this isn't who we want to be. And so we change. We negotiate with the text. We negotiate with this identity. So I pulled up a couple of my favorite stories from the Talmud, and they give you a little bit of background to how we view the text and how we wrestle with it. But I think you have a super chat.
We do. So from Pat for $2. What about all those Christians LARPing as Jews? Thank you for your super chat.
We're getting to that. We're getting to that. It's like you're reading my mind. Okay.
So before you get into your examples, if I'm hearing you, it sounds so to tie it back to the Uno meme. It's kind of like God said, "Here's the rules," and the Jewish people are like, "Awesome, thanks. We're gonna take the rules and we're gonna do our thing with it," and then they're commenting on it and they're developing it from there.
Yeah.
So
there's actually a meme I saw.
Judaism is house rules. And you're basically saying Judaism is house rules. Like
Judaism,
Oops, all house rules.
Oops, all house rules. God is the DM, is the core book for the gaming system, but every table has its own DM, and they, make the rules fit the table, right? For all you gaming nerds out there.
I can't relate to
so
that
sure you can't. Okay. So there's another meme where somebody had done it in the style of like Tumblr fan fiction, and it was like God being the OP of the post, being like, here's the Torah, I worked really hard on it, here you go. And the Jews take it and go, hey, OP, do you take criticism? And I laughed really, really hard. So yeah, there's a lot of homebrew involved. Thank you, Icarus, for that. So the first example from the Talmud is a passage that some of you might be familiar with. It's discussing a rebellious child. I won't read the whole thing. I'll just kind of go over it in broad strokes. This is something you can look up on like any Jewish dictionary, but context is Deuteronomy 21, where it's discussing a rebellious son. And the text says, hey, if a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who does not obey their father and mother and won't listen to them when they discipline him, his father and mother will take hold of him and bring him to the elders at the gate of his town. They will say to the elders, "This son of ours is wayward and defiant. He won't obey us. He is a glutton and a drunkard." And then all the men of the town shall stone him to death. You must purge the evil from among you, and all Israel will hear and be afraid. So if you stop there, you'd be like, whoa, killing your own kid. Not a good look.
That's what the book said. Got to do it.
As what the book says, that's the core rules. But I'm pretty sure that no teenagers would survive into adulthood if people carried this out, literally. So we have to figure out, well, hey, what do we do with this? We don't just clip it out of the book and throw it away. I mean, we need context, yeah? So what some of the early sages do around the year 200 or so is they start looking at the text and they go, this is kind of tricky, so let's figure something out. And they look at the grammar, they look at the phrasing and the word choice, and they go, why'd they pick this word? Why is it phrased this way? And they go, okay, well, it opens up with stubborn and rebellious son. And it said son, not daughter, so girls are automatically off the table. Bam, you've already cut that down by almost half. Then it says, hey, they need to be kind of like aware of what they're doing. If they're rebellious, you've already taught them kind of basic morality and ethics, so they have to have hit an age of responsibility. So what is that? And they discuss, hey, he's probably already hit puberty, so, kids under a certain age are eliminated, so you've narrowed that field even further. And then they go, hey, it says, he's a glutton, so you need to think about the types of food and how much it is that they would need to eat to qualify as a glutton, because it's not just eating, it's eating to a certain amount of excess. And they do these clever loopholes with the text and go, well, hey, if they didn't want you to use the metric of food to determine who was qualified and who wasn't, why is it in there? So you're using the text to narrow the definition without having to add anything. And by the time you get through the end of that paragraph and you read the discussion that they're having, the conditions are so narrow that no one qualifies. And you might be thinking, how could you possibly do this to God's holy word? How could you try to get out of it with clever loopholes? And it's like, well, do you want to kill kids for being stubborn and disobedient? Like, pick a lane, I thought we were here for harm reduction, not like, rocking your kids to sleep, as Kent Hovind used to put it. I'm so sorry that I had to quote him.
Oh my God.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not that sorry.
So this process of renegotiating with the text is how the Jewish religion kind of updates their house rules. And
Yep.
they've decided this rule it isn't who we want to be. This isn't how we want to live.
Yep.
We don't think this fits us. And so we're going to renegotiate with the text in this particular way through these commentaries until we get to a solution that we think fits how we are.
Yeah. And that develops parallel with people in time. The morality that we have as a society now doesn't look the same as it did 200 years ago, much less 2,000 years ago. And if your system doesn't update with you, you're going to go extinct. You know what I mean? Evangelicalism and the fundamentalist, corners, they're the smallest corners of any, religion or tradition at all. They're the loudest because I think they have some recognition that they're not going to last long, but you adapt or go extinct. That's the way that humanity has survived over the generations. You have to adapt. And as our ethics evolve and as our understanding of morality and humanism evolves, Judaism goes along with it. So, another super chat.
$2 from Gupdo3. The Torah protects Cyndi Lauper's right to have fun. Thank you for your super chat.
I like that.
Yeah.
So another person I've had conversations with in the past was very much a fan of the literalist, like, the Bible says this, you should do it, school of interpretation. And I flipped to a passage where it was discussing the holidays. And there's a certain holiday where we're supposed to basically camp out in tents for a week, or huts. And it says, build huts and do it for a week. And I looked at this person and I said, tell me how to build a hut. And they kind of looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I said, build a hut. How tall is it? How wide is it? What do you make it out of? And they were like, well, I mean, I don't know. Like, would you just, and they started making up rules on the spot. And I went, okay, so you're not text only. You can't be.
Mhm.
I'm not going to go so far as to say God handed down an oral Torah directly to Moses and it was secretly passed by word of mouth for generations until they wrote it down. Like, that's not a plausible thing. If you believe that, cool. I'm not going to try to talk you out of it. I don't find that convincing. But the idea there is that there has to be an explanation of some of the things that are in there, because I don't live in, 1000 BCE in a nomadic land. I wouldn't know the context of what a hut looks like back then. So I need some help. People have already had these conversations, which is where the Talmud comes in. We don't read it as a dictate from the ancient sages. They've already had discussions, and we're just jumping in on the latest update on the message board, so to speak.
So a couple of the chats I think tie into this. Wannabe Scholar asks, isn't this essentially apologetics in a way? And I think the difference in flavor here is apologetics is often trying to like kind of justify, like, we've got this belief and so we're going to kind of warp reality, or what, not necessarily going to try to argue to get to that, or like to convince you of something. Whereas this Jewish person isn't trying to convince you, the atheist, of any effing thing. They don't care what you think. And it's not like with a sense of proselytizing, which I think apologetics is. This is just the way that you have the mechanism that Jewish people have to, update their beliefs.
It's identity. We're using the text as one of our identity markers, and we can change our identity. Like, fashion doesn't stay the same. Why the heck would people's traditions stay the exact same?
So, Vadim, I mentioned that you could not only disbelieve and not be anti-Semitic, but you can also be, you could disbelieve in God, you could be an atheist and be Jewish. And he says by birth, yes, but doesn't Jewish, or some say being Jewish also includes the religion. So that segues into the next thing, which is orthodoxy versus orthopraxy. So Christianity.
Yeah, we're gonna learn some big words.
Yeah, we're all the big words on this stream. $10 words
Yeah.
only. So Christianity is, if you come from a Christian background, you're probably very used to the word orthodox, the orthodox view versus the heretical view. And orthodox meaning right belief. What is the correct belief? And what you believe is extremely important. If you have the wrong beliefs, you may, depending on what Christian you talk to, be burning in hell for all eternity. So that's orthodoxy, right?
Yeah.
What is orthopraxy and why does it apply to Judaism?
So, for those of you who want a Greek bonus on your Scrabble boards, orthodoxy is right belief, and orthopraxy is right action or right behavior. And Christianity ideally wants people to behave well because they think the right things, but obviously that doesn't necessarily work out in reality. But orthopraxy is centered around action. It's how you behave. And to kind of pivot off of what Jordan was saying, Judaism is a tradition of action. It's not a tradition of belief that way. To us, action is more important than just a thought bouncing around in your head. The labels of like thought, belief, faith, religious, secular, those are very Christian-centric terms, and they really don't map one-to-one onto the way that Judaism works. So I don't have to believe that a God exists to feed poor people or pursue justice or even take a day off to rest. I don't have to disbelieve that a God exists in order to study and read the text critically. So your belief is like, it's not really relevant. It's like, how do you behave? The same goes for, other categories. And when someone converts to Judaism, like I did, we're not asked to make like a profession of faith or walk down an aisle and shake the hand of a rabbi or say that Moses is God's prophet and the word is divinely inspired. Like, nobody asks you that. You're just taking a class that's usually about a year so that you can go through all the holidays at least once. You learn about ethics. You learn about some of the central text. You learn about different value systems. You learn a little bit about history and culture. And you might pick up a little bit of the languages here and there, like Yiddish or Ladino. And what you are asked is at the end of that process. Hey, are you here of your own free will? Yes or no? Usually the answer is yes. And then they say, hey, are you going to, live among the people as a Jew? You're affirming, like, yeah, I think I'll live as a Jew now. And then you're just asked to do Judaism. You're not asked to believe Judaism. And that was, how my experience went. And that's the overwhelming majority of how people's experiences go if you meet anybody that converts. It's a process. You learn, and then afterward you go, yeah, I'll live as a Jew. And that's it. You have a little, it's like a de facto court. It's like about 3 to 5 of your peers. Usually it's rabbis, sometimes it's lay people, and they listen to your story, and afterwards you go do a ritual immersion, and then bam, that's it. Woo! You're a Jew. Woohoo!
And I think that's worth emphasizing that this entire process was about, here's basically what it means to be a member of this community. And at the end, it was, are you willing to do the things that we just talked about that are necessary to be a member of this community? And if the answer was yes, then awesome. Let's jump in this water and come aboard.
Yeah, there's no pop quiz. You're not expected to know everything. And even when it comes to the laws, they're not acting like Torah police. They'll ask you, do you know about the basic rules of kosher? And I was like, yeah, I know about that. And then I just straight up told him, hey, listen, I really, really love tacos. So this whole meat and dairy thing at the same time, like cheeseburgers, I'm not a super fan of that. And they didn't kick me out of the room. They weren't like, you're disqualified. No Jew. They were like, okay, we understand. Give it a shot. See how it works out for you. They weren't like, oh, that's it, you fail.
There's
because everybody kind of decides how that's most relevant to them. So
one of my good friends is Jewish, and we were deployed together. And when we were getting breakfast in the chow hall, one time he had his little ACU yarmulke on and serving ourselves, and he put a mound of bacon, like a heaped pile of bacon on his plate. And I was like, I said, Rousseau, aren't you Jewish? And he's like, yeah, but bacon's delicious.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I mean, that's something I've actually talked to people about this. They're like, well, you're Jewish, don't you keep kosher? And I'm like, well, yeah, but not the way you think. And they're like, well, I can't believe you can't have bacon. And I'm like, I can eat whatever I want. I just choose not to.
Right.
If I want to go have a piece of catfish for lunch tomorrow, I could totally do that. No one's going to come out of the woodwork and go, Jew, breaking the law.
Confiscate
no
those
one
menorahs.
cares.
Savage says, it seems like Jewishness doesn't map well to the Christian idea of what a religion is.
Yeah,
right?
It really doesn't. It really doesn't.
If you're coming out of Christianity, the idea of religion is what you believe, and that the things you believe are true about the world. And that's just not what Judaism is about.
It's not. It is not. And
it can involve that, but it doesn't.
Yeah, it can.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to. And there are atheist rabbis right now who are leading prayers or doing counseling work or studying texts in a yeshiva, which is like our equivalent to a seminary. And there's no contradiction there. No one's going to go, oh, I can't believe you don't believe in God. That'll rock some worlds for people who want to be theist or feel convinced by, the principles of theism, which is fine. But that's not a requirement. We actually have a very long tradition of agnostic or atheist sages and notable figures. And I mean, hello, Spinoza, anybody?
Yeah. So go ahead.
At this point, it seems like we've been really, we started with the same place, right? We started with a collection of books, and we have two very different religions. One has been focused more on practice, and one is more focused on belief. But if you're coming from this Christian-centric worldview and you have this lens, if you don't understand the other side, it can be very easy for you to view them in a different way, or also to make actions that would treat them differently as well, which I think we're going to get into.
Yeah. I've had people tell me, well, you don't behave the way that I think a Jew should behave, so therefore you're not a Jew.
Right. Because it's definitely their decision.
And I'm like, your opinion on how to do Jewishness, if you're outside
do
of
a
this
Jew.
community, it means like less than nothing to me. Like,
Uh,
don't care. Like,
So one of the things when we were talking about this,
Mm.
when we were talking about doing this and leading up to this, that kind of struck me was about how the laws are about markers of like identity markers, and how
Yeah.
like because it's because of the way in which it's a religion, there's not this separation that like people in
Yeah.
America think I'm an American and a Christian, and those are two different things. Like I've
Yeah.
got my culture, my religion, and ne'er the
Unless you're
twain
one
shall
of
meet.
the MAGA crowd where
Right.
they're like, oh, you gotta be a Christian to be a good American. Like, yeah.
And so like Alex asks, well, why don't, so when this comment came up when we were talking about like the negotiation, right? And he's asking, or they, I don't know what their pronouns are, why don't they, Jewish people, just change the text? Like just why go through this process of this thing? Why not just change it and do whatever, you know?
Why would we change the text?
Yeah.
Why would you do that?
Super chat.
I mean,
from
if
Dr.
you're
Tapioca
playing,
Weasel,
okay,
$2.
no true Jew.
Yeah. So
I felt that. If let's use the D&D analogy. If you're playing a homebrew at your table, are you gonna go to the headquarters for Wizards of the Coast and go, all right, we're gonna rewrite the entire core book based on our homebrew? I mean, they're probably gonna be like, security. They're gonna escort you out, and
then
they're gonna be
they'll
like,
send
why would you do
Pinkertons
that?
on you? But you know,
oh, Pinkertons, God. I was not very excited, but I was also kind of excited for people to learn that the Pinkertons were still around, because yes, they're as shitty as they always were. So
they've
welcome
leaned
to
into
the
it.
Pinkerton hate club.
Yeah. But anyway,
Yeah.
back to Judaism. So
yeah.
So this kind of ties into something that a comment I've seen on Twitter is, well, like I'm an atheist, I'm an anti-theist, I don't hate Jewish people. Why can't you just like throw away the religion part and keep the culture part? I don't want you to change your culture. Just stop being religious.
I mean, first of all, stay in your own lane. I'm not gonna go breaking down a sick temple door and go, you guys should get rid of your religious part because I don't like it personally. Like, what? That's extremely rude. And it's also very Christian centric. It's very like Western values centric. And I really resist this idea that, well, I figured it out and now I get to dictate how everyone else should think and feel and believe and do their culture. Like, bro, just leave us alone. Judaism is not a proselytizing religion. We do not go out to the streets looking for converts. Like, if you want to convert, yeah, sure, come on, we'll leave the light on for you. But you're not going to find us out on the street holding like cardboard signs going, Moses is the way and the Talmud is the, true text. Like, no one cares. We just want to be left alone to do our stuff. And because a lot of people treat us like, Christianity minus the Jesus part, they just kind of import all these assumptions on there. And they're like, well, you're probably just the same old bigoted fundamentalist, da 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 da. And I'm like, dude, stop. Just, can you learn anything about anything? That would be great.
So I think what the piece that people who are saying this are missing is that the culture and the religion are inextricably intertwined.
Yes.
But it's not religion in the sense that the Christian lens would tell them of, I believe in the God and I believe in this creation. This is our cultural internal identity. Here are the rules that we follow as a community that mark us as a people. And so like by telling you what you should do, instead of going through this process of renegotiation, you should just rewrite it from scratch. It's very similar to telling anyone in a different culture, well, what you do in your culture doesn't make sense to me, so you should change your culture because it doesn't make sense to me. It's not how I would do it. Which, like,
sounds
that's
a lot like
cool.
Colonialism,
right? Like if different cultures are different.
You just wave that red flag around because wow.
I went to a Trevor Noah show recently, and one of the things he said that really stuck with me was, it's a different culture. That it's different, not wrong. They do it differently.
Yeah,
that doesn't mean they're wrong.
Yeah,
just they're different. And if I think people take nothing else away, if they took just this away, that
Yeah.
people who do things differently from you doesn't mean that they're wrong for doing it that way. As long as they aren't hurting anybody, like, who cares, right?
Yeah, and it's one of those things where you really have to learn pluralism. You have to. And I had started another set of notes for a different video, but you just reminded me that pluralism isn't just tolerance, because that's a really loaded word. Well, I'm just putting up with this thing and I hate it. Like, I don't want that kind of tolerance. I want people to be able to look at something or someone that's different and go, that's different. Okay. And then just move along. It's not affecting you. And you definitely don't see Jewish people trying to abolish abortion or gay rights. In fact, we're on the front lines of a lot of these struggles. Like, there are traditions in Judaism that prioritize access to abortion. So, you have a lot of the Christian fundamentalists out there trying to go, God, the Bible's against abortion. And first of all, we should not be legislating based on any one religion at all. And second of all, when our religions differ, especially on a topic like that, you can't just pick one, and you need to allow people to access these things. So, they are like, well, we're trying to, practice our faith, but it's actually infringing on everybody else outside their group's faith. And I really detest that.
Like Terry says, you can be Jewish, but why can't you just be normal? Why can't you just, obviously being sarcastic.
Where's the smiling cry emoji? That's how I'm feeling right.
They also said earlier they found the Jewish treatment of their holy text to be a lot more sane. And that reminded me, when you were showing me, when we were prepping for this, you pulled up a picture of like the Talmud, and it had like the original text and then all of the commentary around it, which was so cool to me.
Yeah.
Because it's like it almost bakes in. I don't want to put the label skepticism on it, but the questioning mindset of like, here's the original, and you can't look at it unless you're also looking at all the commentary, like how intertwined that was.
I think I can share my screen. Let me know if you can see it. I have pulled up a page, an example page of our Talmud. This is what one page of the Talmud typically looks like. So when you're like, oh yeah, you guys are interpreting your text, that's a lot more sane. Oh, my friend. Oh, my friend. So this is one page. This little teeny section at the top here is right underneath the big fancy box. That's the Mishnah. That was the first kind of line of discussion on the message board. And then there's another smaller paragraph below that. That's Gemara. So that's, several message board pages of replies later. And then there's a column on the right-hand side. That's always Rashi. He came about in the medieval period. His commentary is always on the right-hand side of the page because he's adding to the discussion. So that's more, commentary and people joining the discussion. And then on the left-hand side, you have, cross-references or what we call Tosafot, which are later additions to, Rashi or people from other regions commenting on the comments on the original text. And then, there's little, what are they, index references and, scripture tie-ins and things like that and other various notes. And this is what every page looks like, because you're not just starting from scratch every time. What's happening when you study Talmud or even the Bible is you are joining an ongoing conversation that's been happening for all these different hundreds of years. And first of all, why would you want to start from scratch? 2, people have already talked about this stuff. Why don't you look at what they're saying and go, hey, maybe I agree, maybe I don't. Rabbis disagree with each other constantly. And
2
if
Jews,
you
3
ever
opinions.
want 2 Jews, 3 opinions, and sometimes 2 Jews, 5 opinions. There are a lot of commentaries where, Rashi will say something, and then later on, Nachmanides will come along and go, Rashi said this, but he's wrong, and here's why. And he'll just write this total rebuttal of a different sage's opinions on stuff. And those are equally valid. And I love that discourse, disagreement, wrestling back and forth with the text and with each other. That's part of what we do. It's Twitter and replies. It's a Reddit thread and all the sub-threads. You know what I mean? It's an ongoing process. It's not just one declaration and everyone must agree with it. It's like, nah, we got a whole lot of different opinions and viewpoints and lenses and cultures and times and
David Oakland asked, what was that in the far left-hand corner? So there was like some text. all
Oh,
the way to
those
the left.
are those are additional commentaries and cross references. Sometimes they'll be referencing a different Talmud. There's two. And the most frequently studied one is the Babylonian Talmud. There's another Talmud that's less studied because it didn't get as much redaction time, so it's a little less easy to parse. And that's the Jerusalem Talmud, which is my favorite, but of course it would be because I'm just that person. And the central part of the text is usually the same, more or less, between the two, but all the commentaries and the frameworks are different between the two. So yeah, there's a lot going on.
Alex Markglass, why wouldn't you at least reformat all that writing at some point to make it more readable?
What do you mean? Is that not readable? You don't know Aramaic?
So
what do you mean?
I'm sure there are. It's
Wait till
published in a
you
lot of
get to
different
the
formats.
commentaries in Ladino and Judeo-Arabic. Like Maimonides, which is one of the most famous other people, he wrote in Judeo-Arabic. Like he served in the Egyptian caliph's court for many years, and he wrote quite extensively in Arabic. So it's good to be a polyglot.
But also, like, I think that comment touches on the pluralism thing we were just talking about. It's like, not that those, I'm sure there's plenty of ways it's been published and packaged and stuff, but let's say that, let's say this is the only way it was. Different people doing their culture differently doesn't mean it's wrong. If that's how it works best for Jewish people to interact with their own text, then great. Like, I could totally see somebody saying, why would we reformat it? Then you would be minimizing all of these commentaries, and that could be a perspective that's completely
not your call to make. Like,
right.
There are a lot of cultures even to this day that use storytelling by mouth or oral traditions in order to pass down, their history. They'll do it through story or through song or through dance, and that's just as valid. Like, that's their culture. That's who they are. They've been doing it for thousands of years. Like, who am I to just roll in and go, nope, it's wrong because it's not like mine? Like, what?
Right. Though David of Oakland has a good counterpoint. If English is good enough for Jesus, it should be good enough for the Talmud. So
that's right. I love it. Yeah, that's man, I've talked to people who have looked me in the eye with a straight face and said, well, Jesus spoke English. I mean, it's written in English. And I'm like,
it's right there, right on my bookshelf.
It's right there in the King James Bible. Which
so,
oh my God. No, look. Okay, so the chat's calling me out. They're really mad that I didn't talk about the Oven of Akhnai. I was getting there, but it's you got a Jew in here. We're not going to stay on topic. So, okay. One of my favorite stories in the entire Talmud. I used to hate it, and now I love it. It's quite literally one of the greatest stories ever. So I'm gonna share one more time, and I'm going to kind of read through this this story. I'm gonna try to make it a little bigger. Okay.
And then once we're done with the story, we're gonna be circling all the way back to why this counts as anti-Semitism. So we've seen you.
We're gonna come back to the Uno deck. I didn't forget. Okay. So there is a really cute, catchy song on the Bim Bam channel called Lo B'Shmayim He, and that's what "It Is Not in Heaven" it means in Hebrew. So this comes from the Babylonian Talmud, and this is from a section of stories that are told in a narrative style. They're not literal history, so don't try to be like, I can't believe you guys think this happened. It didn't literally happen. This is an example.
Again, literalism. Go back.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay. An oven was constructed out of layers of clay with sand in between the layers. Rabbi Eliezer says, hey, yeah, this oven's pure. It's good to go. And the rest of the group of sages, which I can't remember how many there were. I'm sure Simone probably knows. They're like, nah, it's not cool. It's impure. It's not kosher. So Rabbi Eliezer is like, excuse you. And so he argues with them. And he's like, no, I'm right. I'm right. Here's why. And they just would not listen. They're like, nope, you're wrong. And so he goes, the law is in my favor. This carob tree will prove it. And the carob tree uproots and moves 100 yards. And the other sages go, well, we don't take proof from trees. So Rabbi Eliezer tries again. He says, okay, the law's in my favor. This river is going to prove it. And so the river turns around and flows backwards. And the sages are like, we don't take proof from water. Eliezer tries a third time. Okay, the law's in my favor. This house of study, the Beit Midrash, will prove it. So the walls start to collapse in on themselves. And Rabbi Joshua's like, hey, hold up. Walls, if we're arguing about the law, this is none of your business. So the walls are like, and they just kind of freeze in place, so they don't go all the way back up straight, but they also don't collapse to kind of split the difference between the two parties. So, Rabbi Eliezer hitting the end of his rope here, and he's like, okay, the law is in my favor. I'm going to prove it. Heaven will prove it. So a divine voice comes out of heaven and is like, what are you arguing about? The law goes according to Rabbi Eliezer on all matters. And if you were a fundamentalist Christian, you'd be like, well, that's the end of the story. God said it. Done.
Yep.
But Rabbi Joshua, who just rebuked the house of study, got up and quoted Deuteronomy 30 and says, it is not in heaven. And you're like, wait, what? Why is that a win? So, another rabbi explains, hey, God, you already finished this draft. You already printed the core book. Torah was already given at Mount Sinai. From that point forward, we don't rule according to divine voices coming out of the sky. And then he paraphrases Exodus 23, where the straight text says, you shall not incline after the majority to do evil. But he's paraphrased it in a way that interprets it, you shall incline after the majority to do good. So you're like, whoa, did they just tell God to get good? Like, what's happening? And so later on, Rabbi Nathan, another rabbi, is talking to Elijah the prophet. And it was like, hey, did you see what happened back there? What was God doing this whole time? And Elijah goes, the Holy One was going, they got me. My kids, they got me. Like, and this story is literally us going, hey, once that core book is printed and handed down, we get to do the homebrew. And there's more to the story, but this is the perfect encapsulation of how Judaism deals with a text. Even if a divine voice were to come down and go, you should all be eating no cheeseburgers, or if it said, you should eat cheeseburgers, we would be like, you already gave it to us, so you don't really get a say anymore.
Cool story, but we're talking here, so
Cool story, but we were talking. What's going on? So this is the equivalent of the Uno meme. God going, you can't play +2 on a +2, and it's like, we have the cards, we'll take it from here, thanks. So yeah, that's just one of those things where people are like, well, I can't believe, but God said in the Bible, and it's like, well, we don't listen to these decrees. Even if a divine voice were to come down, we don't rule by divine fiat. We follow, morals and ethics and logic. So
A.L. Trucker said he wanted to make sure his disbelief in the God of the Bible and the events therein isn't misunderstood as anti-Semitism or some sort of hatred. And I think what we're getting at here is not only can you disbelieve everything that happened, none of it's literally true, the Garden of Eden didn't happen, you could do all that and still be Jewish. Not only it's not like there's no contradiction there. And so if that kind of disbelief in and of itself isn't anti-Semitic, Jonathan Becker earlier asked, why is any of the stuff we're talking about is anti-Semitic? How okay, these are misunderstandings, but where does it cross that line?
Oh, we're getting to that.
So we're getting to that right now. So we've talked about the misconceptions that atheists have and some of the ways that those misconceptions are leveled at Jews in online discourse. And I think that one of the best ways to demonstrate kind of how all this comes together to end up manifesting as something that's anti-Semitic is to use an example.
And before you get there, just to kind of clarify, because I don't want people to get the wrong idea, have fun with the text, because we do. I mean, look at the story I just read. How can you read that and not start laughing, legitimately? Can you imagine, being in a group of religious leaders and God comes down and goes, hey, you're doing it wrong. And we're like, who invited you? You know,
thanks for the book, killer. We'll take it from here.
Thanks for the book, Wizards of the Coast, but we're doing a homebrew and you're not invited to the table right now. So, and it's fine if he wants to play, but we're doing the homebrew rules. So yeah, get with this table. So talking about religion and culture and, well, this is religious, but that's secular. And why can't you do the culture part? But why can't you do the religious part? And the way Christian atheists largely don't understand that is the religion is the culture. The culture is the religion. It's an ethno-religion. It's not just an ethnicity. It's not just a religion, for whatever you take that to mean. It's one identity. You can't separate them out. Jews are Judaism. Jews are Judaism, and Judaism is Jews. And the thing that makes us Jewish is exactly the stuff that makes other people not Jewish. And Canada, because I said I had smoke for y'all, Canada's still dealing with the repercussions of the residential school system. And they took kids away from their Indigenous families, and they denied them access to their clothing, their language, even their hairstyles, and they separated them from their entire family because they wanted to civilize them or Christianize them. And by assimilating them, it literally erased who they were. And it was a form of genocide. And when I hear people saying, well, why don't you get rid of the religious part? Or why do you want to get rid of the thing? You know, if you want to get rid of the things that make Jews Jewish, you want to get rid of Jews.
Right.
Sit with that for a minute.
Like that's cultural genocide, and genocide is bad.
Is bad. I think we can agree. It's all of those things at once. And again, it's not based on the thoughts rattling around in your brain.
Right.
It's not relevant whether you believe in a God or not. You're still a Jew, either by
Right.
birth or conversion, whatever.
And so nobody is saying that the Bible is incorrect when it's like a literal interpretation of the Bible is incorrect or whatever. That's not being anti-Semitic. Saying that you think this way, usually incorrectly, but you do these things that don't fit in, that I disagree with, so you should change those things. That's the problem, right?
Yeah.
Are you ready for
so
the example?
One of my peers in the Jewish online community, her name's Jessica Price, and she is a fantastic writer. She puts this way better than me. She has a blog post talking about modular religion, which is how she phrases it. And she kind of explains this Christian mindset of how belief is just a chip that you could unplug at will and substitute with a different one or nothing at all. So, you know, there was a mention of like Messianic Jews. The idea of you unplugging the Jewish belief module while being a Jew and just plugging in the Jesus module, or taking like the Messianic Jews, you unplug whatever other belief chip in a Christian and just replace it with the Torah chip. Like, that's not how that works at all. It's apples and brake pads, so to speak.
Which don't make good brake pads, apples, as a rule.
They're both useful for two completely different purposes.
You might be able to make an apple into a brake pad if you tried hard enough.
I don't recommend it. I don't recommend it. Like, you could do this like Johnny Dangerously. You could use an apple as a brake pad once.
That's true.
Once.
So, for an example of all of these kind of behaviors lumped in together, there was a particular Twitter thread by a gentleman you may know as Holy Kool-Aid, who is a atheist YouTuber, and he posted this meme. For those who can't read, it's a little small. Anyone else thinking celebrating this holiday is fucked up, and it has Passover because lamb's blood helps God kill the right kids. That's the meme. And
so before I say anything about this, I'm not going to be like, oh, no one should listen to Thomas Westbrook ever. Don't watch Holy Kool-Aid. His series on faith healers is really good. Faith healers are grifters and they're charlatans, so I'm not going to be like, ditch this guy forever. Canceled. Like, no, we're just using this as an example of, hey, there's room to grow.
I also don't. I mean, I don't know this guy, but I'm willing to believe that he's not like a secret neo-Nazi or anything crazy like that.
I
just,
mean,
like, I'm sure he's a fine, pleasant person. It's just this just goes to show how this kind of mindset gets imported without any scrutiny and can lead to very ignorant takes on the internet.
So the meme that he has reposted and that I have very poorly crossed out because I didn't want to just repost it uncritically, it's making the point that Passover is about killing kids. Like, haha, killing kids. That's so wrong and gross and that's fucked up. And there's other screenshots that we're going to show where literally immediately a lot of people who were both Jewish and non-Jewish jumped in to go, hey, yo, what the fuck, man? What are you doing? Do you want to retract this before you make an ass of yourself? And the long story short is no, he did not want to retract this. And yes, he actually did end up making an ass of himself. And therefore, I have now brought this into the conversation as an example of what not to do.
So why don't you explain real quickly why is this an anti-Semitic idea? Like what it, so
Okay.
isn't there the story in the Bible? There's a story in the Exodus where they have the plagues, and one of those plagues is killing the firstborn. So why and why would celebrating this event not be bad?
All right, cool. So this is textbook anti-Semitism because it is completely ignorant of how Judaism celebrates its holidays and recognizes its text, but it's also importing bad Christian theology onto Jews. So his idea that, it's about celebrating bloody death of kids. Wow, what a shitty God, am I right? Ha ha ha, stupid Jews, stupid anyone who celebrates Passover, am I right? And
because again, the meme was about the celebration Passover.
It was about the celebration of kids killing kids specifically. And immediately a bunch of Jews jumped in and go, hey, if you've never been to a Passover Seder, just let us know. We don't celebrate Passover that way. In fact, there's only a very brief part of a Passover Seder that mentions the plagues, much less the death of the firstborn. And my friends, it's not a party where we are like, haha, death of firstborns, haha, death of kids, woo, get wrecked, babies from Egypt. Like,
sucks to suck, nerds.
Sucks to suck, get wrecked. Like, there is a tradition in a lot of Jewish communities called the Fast of the Firstborn, and it is done in the lead up to Passover. And it's one of these things where you're memorializing this event and going, whoa, this was serious. Like, I'm glad that me being a firstborn, of which I am, I'm glad that I, am alive. That's pretty awesome. Life is cool. So, Tapper Dinosaur. He says, stupid Egyptian babies.
What do they know?
Yeah, right. But yeah, Passover, it is quite literally, first of all, there's no archaeological evidence that the Exodus happened. I mean, shocking to some people to learn that. But, hey, Ron Wyatt didn't actually find chariot wheels in the middle of the Red Sea. Like, this is not a thing. And the charred mountaintops at Sinai, those are just geological formations and stuff. So, yeah, that's not something that literally happened. So
again, that's an example of this meme is importing ideas of literalism into a religion that doesn't have those ideas.
Yes, but more specifically, the idea that Jews rejoice in killing babies or being bloody about, children specifically, that is something called blood libel. And that was really popular in the medieval age. Blood libel is a very old Christian anti-Semitic trope, and it accuses Jews as a group of being bloodthirsty baby killers. And an especially disgusting version of blood libel claimed that Jews would kill Christian babies so that we could bake their blood into our matzah. And first of all, matzah is literally just flour, water, and maybe a little salt and oil, and that's it. But there were actually periods of really extreme anti-Semitism leading up to Easter, where Jews would be accused of murdering a child, or a child would go missing and they'd blame the Jews, and then there'd be a lynch mob or violence, or some people would be killed. And by accusing Jews with this crappy meme of being like, haha, child death, yay, blood, by spreading that narrative, it's just repackaging blood libel. Like, it's this cringy, like, r/atheism meme, and it's bloodthirsty Jews, am I right? And then he gets really pissy when people are pushing back on it.
Super chat from Vandalia 1998, 199. He says, trying to watch both us, and the Ohio issue voter result.
Yes.
Thank you for tuning in. Appreciate the super chat. Really hope that this election goes well. I'm in Virginia, and if the Senate could remain blue so we can restrain our extremely bad governor, that would be awesome.
Voting in primaries and local elections far more impactful than just doing it once every 4 years for president, just saying. So
so this is repackaging of the blood libel. It's putting on this idea of first of all, believing that happened at all, but also celebrating that specific part of the story is like that's what's important. So like, as a brief aside, what is Passover about? If it's not about that, what is it actually about?
Liberation. Like, the story itself is a very trumped up version of we were slaves, but then God set us free. Yay! That's the whole point of the story. And, you know, American slaves used to read the Exodus and find inspiration from it. Do you think that they were reading the text and going, haha, killing babies? Like, no. Are you kidding me? That's ridiculous. Do you think that Thomas intended to do blood libel? No. Do you think that he set out that morning to go, ha ha, I'm going to do some Judenhass. I'm going to do some
Jews.
show those Jews. Like, no, he didn't intend to do that. It was the ignorance of the context that caused this situation, we'll say. And what was really unfortunate about it is that when people were like, yo, this is not even close to being correct, he doubled down. And it was really frustrating to watch because different people were trying so many different ways to phrase it to say, hey man, this is not correct. This is really off base. You're just repackaging blood libel. And in fact, there was a slide in there from one of Dapper Dinosaur's things that was like, hey, are you just going to accuse them of poisoning wells while you're at it? And that didn't go over well because, you know, in Thomas's mind, beliefs are fair game, but his idea of what the beliefs are completely wrong. So
Dr. Tapioca Weasel for $100. Thank you so much for your generosity.
Wow,
Amazing.
that's amazing.
Bright red. At risk of embarrassing myself in the hopes of helping understanding, let me say that I could/would make this mistake. I took a convo with my Jewish therapist where even though she's an atheist, she felt the AS here and educated me, but it wasn't
anti-Semitism.
Anti-Semitism, yeah. And so like,
Yeah.
I don't think you need to be embarrassed because when I first saw that meme, I was like, I feel like there's something wrong here, but I didn't fully really understand what the implications were until I started talking to my Jewish friends, and then I understood. So like, I think the problem comes in not like the not understanding because you can't help how you were raised. You can't help, you don't know what you don't know. The problem comes in the doubling down and like when you're saying, hey, here's this thing that Jews believe, and Jews are saying, no, it's not. Let me tell you what Jews believe. And you're like, no, I know what Jews are like. Like that's where the problem is. So
man,
I think
there's a really
show that this could happen to anyone, right? And so
yeah,
like,
it can happen to anybody. Yeah. And again, ignorance is a really easy problem to fix. You just learn. And I mean, honestly, we all have cell phones. That's almost the sum total of human knowledge in your palm right there. You can look up almost anything that you want and have answers in very little time. So if you're making a comment and first a bunch of people from that marginalized group go, yo, this is not correct. And then B, a bunch of neo-Nazis start showing up to your thread going, yeah, man, glad you're seeing the light. You might need to pull back a little.
If I ever say anything and a bunch of neo-Nazis start cheering, I will immediately assume I'm wrong unless I have compelling evidence to the contrary. Like,
I think this kind of gets to the heart of what Jordan and I's channel is all about, though, and it's the skeptical mindset, right? So being willing to change your mind, being willing to Jordan and I have said stupid stuff and said incorrect stuff on this channel, but when we were informed about it, we said, oh, sorry, we were wrong. Let's fix that. And now we're right now.
I mean, have you ever been wrong before? It happened to me.
Well, see, the thing is, you can be wrong one time. So you were wrong about Christianity. So you changed that, but now you can't be wrong anymore because you're an atheist.
So
I used up all my attempts there. Man, should have saved it for something good.
Yeah. So Alex asked how people explained his mistake to him, and the answer is many and varied ways.
Many and sundry ways.
Yeah.
Did any of them go over?
So some of the highlights, I don't want to rehash this whole Twitter thread because that's not the point. We're not trying to do Twitter drama, it's just being a thing. But some of the points that kind of stuck out were this he said, learn to separate people from beliefs. You can respect the former while critiquing the latter, which is true. You can. However, you should be correct about what you're critiquing. And when you say, well, this is a Jewish belief, and all the Jewish people in your threads are saying, no, it is very much not, that should be a clue,
Yeah.
right? And so here,
Yeah.
so kind of making a laundry list, putting literalism, that's incorrect. Univocality, that's incorrect. Saying that this is the way that Jews believe when Judaism is is about practice, not beliefs. That's another red flag. So these are kind of what you can. I hope you can see how these are kind of combining into making a
Yeah.
Voltron of shittiness.
Yeah, very much so. It's like when you say you can critique the belief, but then your idea of the belief is, haha, killing kids. Am I right? Like,
Right. And as we have discussed,
that's, I think, Jordan, is that what they call a straw man?
that would be a straw man, in fact.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That can serve as today's fallacy of the day, since we didn't
I forgot the
prepare
new
one.
one.
So
There
there
you
you
go.
go.
Yeah.
Today's fallacy of the day
Yeah.
is the straw man fallacy,
Yeah.
where you make
Yeah,
up a
and
fake
I don't
version of people's beliefs.
I do not want people trying to jump all up in his Twitter thread and put him all
No.
like, do not do that. Thomas,
again,
do not watch this video and think that I sicked an audience on you. Do not. I did
The
not.
takeaway here is
Um,
not Thomas is a bad person. The takeaway
No,
here
it's
is
just,
Thomas
hey,
is probably a genuine person who does like Jewish people, and yet even still, he
yeah,
had this ignorant take, and so this should
yeah.
be not a like Thomas is bad, but there, but for the grace of God go I, sort of the
Yeah,
idea.
God, I kind of hate that
Yeah.
phrase sometimes, but
Uh, yeah,
and also like I really, really like what Simone in the chat is saying. One big thing that comes over in a lot of this stuff is people assuming, well, no one's ever had this brilliant thought before about this morally ambiguous problem. Like, we've been having these exact conversations for 2000 plus years, ever since this narrative was written down or passed along a campfire, whatever, in whatever form. People have been discussing the morality and the ethics of this story and God's role in it. You are not the first person to have this thought. You know, in fact, as Jews, we question the decisions, commands, and values of what's being told to us by God in the text lots of times. You might know about this one really obscure story from this dude you've probably never heard of named Abraham. And he had a kid, and God goes, "Hey, Abraham, we're cool, right?" And Abraham says, "Yeah, we're very cool. Like, we're tight. We're besties." And God goes, "Okay, kill your kid."
prove it.
And Abraham doesn't even hesitate. He's like, "All right, put the kid in the wagon. We're going up the hill." Anybody who reads that story should immediately ask themselves, "Hey, why didn't he hesitate? What's wrong with Abraham right now? Why is he not hesitating?" Any rational person would be like, maybe I shouldn't sacrifice a kid. But
Right.
in history, people did used to offer up their kids as sacrifices. So there's historical context. B, there's an ethical conundrum. Why would God tell him to do that? Was Abraham right to start doing it? And is it a virtue that he started to do it? Christianity considers it a complete virtue that Abraham was going to do this. They're like, well, he had faith that God was going to raise him from the dead because, Isaac was the promised, seed and all of his kids were to come through there. So Abraham's faith was so good, you guys. It's like,
because being
did
stabbed by
anybody
your
ever...
dad wouldn't be traumatic at all.
No, it wouldn't be traumatic as heck. I wonder how Isaac dealt with that after, honestly. And there's rabbinic literature that writes like essentially fanfic about their relationship after.
Savage with the $2 super chat. You mean to tell me that Jews disagree?
Disagree.
Gas.
What?
Yeah.
But here's a thing. Here's a question that was asked to me one time, and I will pass it on to you. Has it ever occurred to you that Abraham failed the test? And I know what you're probably thinking. Yeah, but the text says God reckoned it to him as righteousness. Again, is that the correct assessment? Ask yourself that. There's not a right answer. This is something that you need to wrestle with. And wouldn't you know it, the word Israel is God wrestler or struggles against God. And we do that a lot.
Right. So like, even if bringing it back to the Passover thing, even if you thought like this is an evil thing, that doesn't mean because of the way that Jewish people approach their text that they would feel married if they agreed. Yes, that was wrong and bad, and we agree. And that's not at all, again, not contradictory. So
yeah,
we should be able to call out bad beliefs, bad practices, but when somebody is but if you don't understand what somebody's beliefs actually are, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Or if you don't understand what their practices actually are, that's another thing. So part of this is having this preconceived notion of what, Jews
This
believe or practice, and then just going on that
Yeah.
assumption,
you have this Christian caricature of
Right.
Judaism
Yeah.
that is
And
what
that's
you're
a
criticizing.
lot of, if you read a lot of medieval disputations between like Jews and Christians, it's just caricatures all the way down. It's cringy, it's awful, honestly. But if any of you happen to know like any neo-pagans or Wiccans, you can immediately trigger them the same way by going, "Why do you worship Satan?" I can feel the psychic damage in the chat right now, because anybody that understands anything about neo-paganism or Wicca will be like, "I don't believe in Satan. What are you talking about?" It's like asking a Christian, "Why do you worship Vishnu?" They would be like, "What?"
What? Yeah.
So one question that I hadn't brought up before, so I'm going to take a risk in just springing this
That's
on
okay. I'm
you.
good off the cuff. Let's go.
Yeah. So somebody on Twitter asked me when I was promoting this stream and talking about anti-Semitism and atheism. They're like, they challenged me. They assumed that I don't know. What they said was, how come I can't criticize practices like circumcision and say that they're wrong? Right? Why would that be
Yeah.
anti-Semitic? And
Yeah.
well, first of all, I think the answer probably would be that wouldn't necessarily be anti-Semitic. I mean, some Jewish people I've read also criticize that. But I
They do it all
think,
the time.
right. And so, first of all, that
Mhm.
again, misconception on what the attitude is among Jewish people about their own practices. But two, so what would your perspective be on someone if someone said, I think circumcision is wrong and bad?
So
here's
there's
why.
an account, another my other favorite account on Jewish Twitter or Twitter. For those of you on
Which
Blue Sky, there's a
I love that.
there's a Jewish version of Blue Sky, and we call it Jew Sky or Jewski because it's spelled the same way. It's spelled the same way. Yeah, didn't. So one of my favorite accounts is Just Say Christian, and that's basically, the summary of a lot of his replies to people is, you were saying the word religion, but really what you meant was Christianity. Why don't you just say Christianity instead of saying religion? So he frequently will reply to people in these very discussions, and they'll go, "Why can't I critique the beliefs?" And his exact words are, "You're not qualified." This is one of those instances. You can critique, the theology or the practice or whatever, but you need to know what they are first. And the vast majority of people who came from a Christian background or live in a Christian hegemony do not know what those beliefs or practices are. They are not even qualified to have this discussion.
$5 super chat from David Oakland. This has been a great discussion. It's got to go, but if we have you on
that's
again,
very
I'll definitely
sweet.
tune back in. Thank you very much. We will endeavor
Thank
to
you,
do
David.
that.
Yeah.
So Ale Trucker says genital mutilation is wrong, and I don't have a way to care if that insults anyone. I think what we're saying, and I don't necessarily care for the language there, but I think what we're saying, AL, is that it's okay to have critiques as long as you start by understanding what the practice is and then engaging in a conversation with the person who is doing the thing that you think they're doing, checking to make sure that you're accurate, and then approaching it like a dialogue, as opposed to people tend to assume they understand what's happening without actually understanding, right? And I think that's what we're getting at.
I mean, honestly, we're running out of time, which sucks because I get a lot of these replies. What's unfortunate, for Al Trucker, or Alex in the chat, is if I get 100 replies, 99 of them that say genital mutilation's bad, you shouldn't do it, and use those phrasings are neo-Nazis. And because that's the overwhelming majority of people who use that exact phrasing when they're trying to get in my mentions, it really turns me off and makes me not even want to engage, because those people are arguing in bad faith. I know that your people in your chat are not arguing in bad faith, because if they were, they wouldn't be here.
I think
So
if we learned
if you want
anything
to,
tonight,
yeah, if you want to approach those conversations, like, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
But you have to approach it in good faith. You can't be like, I've already made a decision and nothing you say can convince me and you're wrong and I just want you to say you're wrong. Like, that's not how
Wait,
discussions work.
neo-Nazis argue in bad faith? What? I think if we've learned anything from this, it should be the takeaway is if Jewish people had this conversation and agreed as a people that this was a harmful practice and they didn't want to do it anymore, then they have a process and a culture of changing that practice if that is something they decide to do, right? So it's not like this is going to be. It's not like it's a cultural tradition that is inflexible and insensitive to the harms of people, right? And so kind of going off on the assumption that that's just the way it is, and if you don't agree with that, you must stop being Jewish because being Jewish is bad because of this reason, I think is kind of the attitude we're getting at.
Yeah, because, and again, like I see some people going, well, I don't think that's true. I don't think that most people who are saying that are neo-Nazis. Like, my mentions literally get filled up with people saying this shit to me. Yes, it happens. And whether my hyperbolic mention of 99% is wrong for you or not is irrelevant. It happens a lot, like a lot. It's the same crowd with Pepe avatars that go, the Talmud says, and then it's like some crappy like JPEG that's just been compressed to all hell, and all the citations are wrong, and have books that aren't even in the Talmud, and they're all just, it's complete bullshit. So yeah, it happens. And those people, again, they're arguing bad faith because they're neo-Nazi trolls. And these are discussions, again, that people have been having for a very long time. But there's also historical context to saying you should not be allowed to do this thing. And again, we don't have the time to go into that, which sucks because that specific topic is a big one. But it's like, if you're going to approach this as a discussion and go, hey, what do you think about this? How do you approach this? Are there Jews that don't circumcise? Like, yes, there are Jews that don't circumcise their kids. And they themselves are not circumcised. In fact, if I could get that out there, if a guy or a person who has a penis wants to convert to Judaism, they actually don't have to get full-on circumcised in the way that, you're probably thinking. If they choose to go to a physical ceremony that is equivalent, there may just be a quick pinprick of blood. Not, all right, here, bite the bullet, all right, we're gonna get you half off, all right.
Yeah.
But even at that point, if they're an adult and they're consenting and they want to do it, then
if it's an adult, they ask you, hey, are you comfortable doing this? If you're not, okay. That's not like, you're disqualified. Like, again, consent is extremely important in that sense. So people approaching it from a conversion perspective get to make that decision. So
Steve Reno, $2. What does God need with a starship? I don't know.
that movie.
What movie is this? I'm not familiar with the
Star Trek. Like Star Trek the movie. Like, okay, the old Shatner version of Star Trek.
Okay.
Yeah, Star Trek 5. Yeah.
One thing
they
we
meet
didn't really...
God in space, and God's asking them for a starship, and
they
say, "What is God need with a?" Okay, it's a whole thing. Watch it. It's, again, the odd-numbered Star Trek movies aren't as good as the even-numbered ones. I stand by that. Star Trek is the best one. Don't at me.
So one thing we didn't really talk about, Shanti, and something that I think is relevant to the conversation, particularly when it comes to Christian atheists, is that many Christians, Christian atheists, when they were Christians, were actually taught in church and Sunday school that Jews were bad, okay? Because they were the ones that crucified Jesus. So like there's all this baggage and even implicit things that are going on inside their brains because they've been conditioned to relate.
Using the word Pharisees as a pejorative.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of that stuff, when you're going through your deconstruction, it's not just understanding the practices and the belief system, but also understanding your own perception of even the word that,
Yeah. there were so many other things that I trimmed out of my notes because I thought we were going to run out of time, which, you know, we
Yeah.
will. But
We will, yeah.
another big Scrabble bonus for you folks out there in the audience is deicide. That's another very ancient, if not the OG, Christian anti-Semitic trope. Jews are collectively responsible for killing Jesus, and they're, you know, eternally guilty, and it's okay to persecute them because they shouldn't have done that. Da, 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 da. And first of
Even though
all,
it's the
Jews didn't
Romans.
crucify anybody. That was the Romans, actually. So,
Right.
2, the Sanhedrin did not meet at nighttime. What are you doing? And 3, the Jews, and specifically like the Pharisees, are the perennial villains of the New Testament. And if you think that you know anything about Judaism, or especially Second Temple Judaism, by reading the New Testament, you don't. You really don't. When you call someone a Pharisee, you're just calling them a Jew, because Pharisees are the antecedents to the rabbis. So,
Yeah, and
what are you
also
doing?
won't get into this, but the Pharisees are not
Yeah.
the ultra legalistic, like don't care about
No.
people thing that the caricature that was given to you in Sunday school. That's not accurate. We won't get into that, but that's just not accurate.
Yeah, it's
so
not accurate. That would be the Sadducees.
I think the topic we just touched on, and like the way that it's
Mhm.
being approached, touches on what I think is an important thing for atheists to keep in mind when we get into this, or any kind of discussion, atheists
Yeah.
and skeptics, is like, what's the goal? What are we trying to accomplish by
Yeah.
having this discussion? And
Right.
I would submit that the goal should be to help people to enhance well-being and to seek the truth.
Yeah.
Right. And if that's our goal as skeptics, then that means that in order to pursue that goal, we should be careful that we're not harming people who are different than us, or forcing our beliefs on other people, or those
Yeah.
lacks of beliefs. None of those things would go to those goals, right? So stopping
Right.
the practice of any and all religions in and of itself is a goal that not only doesn't make sense, but is harmful, because
Yeah.
not every religion is Christianity. There are some religions that
Exactly.
are, newsflash, different from Christianity, and
AKA all the other ones.
right, and in some cases, the religion is inextricably linked to the culture, and so if you eradicated the religion, you would eradicate the culture, and that's genocide. So
That's genocide. This is exactly why I was mentioning like Indigenous and First Nations people. That is why I did that, because Americans have a very recent frame of reference for that. You know, not letting them dress the way that their people dress, not letting them speak their language, not letting them wear their hair that way. All the things that are the cultural identity markers, even the religious or what they would think of as ritual practices, those were either forbidden or specifically, removed. And that is a form of genocide. And again, that's not something that we do here. Secularism, as I see people discussing in the chat, secular and religious, again, does not map one-to-one onto other religions like it does to Christianity. There are Hindus who will very just vociferously argue with you about what's secular versus religious. There is not a clear boundary there. And you really have to have the context before you go into these discussions thinking, I know everything I need to know, all religion bad. Haha, I'm so enlightened. Like, don't
Right.
do that. Because I really care about the atheist community. If I didn't care, I wouldn't be bothering. I wouldn't be wasting my time. I would just be like, and I'd write everybody off. I actually appreciate the atheist community because they are raising legitimate criticisms and speaking out against Christian hegemony, especially Christian nationalism. That's a critical discussion we need to be having right now, because it's not just harming Jews, it's harming trans, it's harming homosexuals, it's harming people from any marginalized community, anybody in the LGBTQ spectrum. That's harming, and they're speaking out about it. So I want them to have really strong arguments. I want you guys to be able to take on these bad faith actors and be able to do it in a way that's not setting up a bunch of straw men. Because, like, we hate it when the freaking apologists do that. You know, it's the most annoying thing in the freaking world. Like, Frank Turk gets up there and goes, "Oh, it takes too much faith to be an atheist." It's like, oh my god, atheism's not a faith position. What are you doing? Like,
that's a great point. Is that channel how frustrating it is when Frank Turek tells you as an atheist what you think. Now,
Ugh.
have some empathy and imagine how it feels to a Jewish person or a Hindu person or whoever, like when you're telling them how they believe and they are actively telling you that you're wrong, right? So
That happened actually to I saw a clip of Shannon Q and Apologia where like somebody had called in and were out talking to them about, oh, you're suppressing the truth and you're unrighteous. And so, Shannon just pointedly asked this person, "Are you calling me a liar?" And they were like, "Well, no, I'm not calling you a liar. I'm just saying that the Bible says that you're intentionally disbelieving." And she was like, "Hold up. I'm telling you what I'm doing and what I think and what I believe. Your book is saying something else. So you are calling me a liar." And she made this person admit it. Like, you are calling people a liar about what they know in their own mind
mhm. Yeah.
because your book says it. Like, are you kidding me with this?
So coming on 2 hours, so let's bring it to a close and
Yes.
summarize everything that we've gone over thus far.
Mm,
So there are
Yeah.
things that Christians view when it comes to the Bible that are like
Mm.
some Christians that are just intrinsic to the way that they perceive the Bible. That some of those
Yeah.
things include univocality. The Bible says the same thing throughout, that it is literally true.
Mhm.
That the things that it prescribes in Exodus or in Leviticus are applicable today without modification. And these are not attitudes that are
Yeah.
shared by
Right.
in Judaism.
This is not how we read the text. In fact, I think, and Simone will correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's Rashi who is speaking of the first like 2 chapters of Genesis. And he says, if you think this is 6 literal days, you are in error. Like, you are doing it wrong. And that was so refreshing to me when I had come out of a textual literalism, 6-day creation, 6,000 years old, evolution, like reading the text critically and it's encouraged. That was liberating for me. I love studying. I would be in, some sort of seminary or yeshiva or rabbinical school getting my master's degree if I had the money for it because I love to study. I love history. It's one of my favorite things now. But I didn't know this stuff because it was all, oh, literal this, Bible this, what's the word? Sola scriptura, I got liberated from a lot of that. It was causing toxic thinking and toxic behavior. And learning pluralism and learning how to just, hey, people are different. That's fine. Doesn't affect me. It's cool. Just leave them alone.
Yeah.
That honestly, that changed my life, man.
And really internalizing that other cultures are different, not wrong,
Mhm.
and people
Yeah,
can
just
act
different.
differently, and that's okay. And in the case
Mhm.
of Judaism specifically, that it is a religious faith that's about right practices, the practices that identify you as Jewish, not
Yeah.
beliefs. And so that the culture and religion are inextricably linked. And so when you're saying that, so if you try to tell someone to stop doing these cultural things, that's what you're doing. It's not
Yeah.
criticizing religion. You're basically telling them to erase their culture.
Yeah. And this is my final vocabulary bonus for you Scrabble nerds out there. I am begging you to learn what etiology is. I'll even spell it. Etiology. Etiology. Please learn what that is. It will completely revolutionize the way that you read the Bible. Instead of thinking, well, this is either literal and it happened, or it's all just fake, made up, Sky Daddy fairy tales, LMAO, Rafflecopter. Like, no, there's a third and yet fourth option, and it's etiology. Every culture does this. Every culture does it. It
Sky
doesn't
Daddy fairy
fit
tales,
into,
but I only lack the
yeah.
leaf guys.
Yeah, it's so cringy. But yeah, learn what an etiology is and then go back and read Genesis and see if you don't go, oh shit, that's how they explain patriarchy. Like, wow, damn. Because that's what it is.
Dapper Dino maintains there's literally no one who practices sola scriptura,
All
which is
right.
true. I mean, they may say
Yeah,
they are,
very true.
but in fact, like that everyone's negotiating with the text.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where we got all the way here to the end. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you would like to make sure we hit before we go?
It'll probably hit me when we're done. Like, we pretty much went through the outline that I had. We didn't really talk about utilitarianism, but that can be a different discussion. Whatever. We can come out later.
Is there, if people would like to hear more of your hot takes on Judaism or anything else, where should they go to learn more?
Oh man. Okay. Honestly, just learn history and learn the history of the text. So just check out academics like Dan McClellan, Kip Davis, Josh from Digital Hammurabi. Mark Luchter is another scholar that you can look at. Jennifer Bird. There are so many good scholars out there doing this work. Joel Baden is a great one. Just learn history from people who study it for a living. You don't have to go to like a random person on the internet. I mean, you could do some Googling. You could read, the Jewish Encyclopedia. You could do stuff like that. But honestly, some of those academics have been instrumental in helping people unpack these ways of thinking because they're just presenting it in a historical context. And yeah, and
don't learn your history from Richard Carey.
Yeah, don't get your history from Richard Carey.
Whatever else you do, do not do that.
Yeah, yeah, don't do that. His takes are so hot they're plasma, and yeah.
Thierry wants to thank you for representing all the opinions of all Jews simultaneously.
Maybe we didn't pay attention earlier. So yeah.
You know what though? It's so funny. I'm actually not worried about the trolls or people trying to at me and be like, defend this thing. It's actually like my Jewish peers. They're going to be like, why didn't you phrase it this way? Why didn't you mention this story? Why didn't you discuss the grammar of this verse? That like, those are the ones that I'm really paranoid about because they're going to call out every little mistake. They're going to be like, hey, you did good, but so yeah, those are the ones going to keep me up tonight.
So hopefully we can have you on again. This was excellent. Thank you to the chat, and thank you especially to those who send in super chats. It really helps the channel.
Yes,
helps me convince my wife that we are not in fact going to go bankrupt running this hobby. If you would like to support us in other ways, we do have a Patreon. You can go give us money to do this if that's what you want to do, and you'll even get to see our videos ahead of time. Live streams included once we have a time machine. We haven't figured that out yet. We'll get there. And at the request of everyone,
don't you know that Jews can time travel?
Well, I mean, with the space laser, I think it's something to do.
Oh,
with I don't know.
Hang on. Do you realize that I am actually in the secret Jewish space laser corps?
There it is.
Oh
Mazel tough, baby. Pew pew. Take that, Marjorie Green.
Yeah, but if you
that's
don't,
a joke, people.
Yes, it is. It is all humor. If you don't join our Patreon and everything, that's you can still support us by liking, commenting, sharing this, especially if you run into somebody who is an atheist that might be falling into some of these ignorance traps. Hopefully this can help them out.
Help your peers out. I mean, that's why I'm doing this. I care about this community because they've helped me with some of my religious trauma as well. Like, it's not like I just converted to a different religion and I was suddenly okay and didn't have any baggage. Like, no, it took a long time to get, through fear of hell or whatever. And the atheist community is where I unpacked a lot of that and people reassuring me that they've been through this. So I care, I'm invested, and I want to be your ally, and I want you to be our ally because you're some of the strongest allies that are out there. So
DM with $2, peace and long life. Live long and prosper.
That's right.
Thank
you for knowing both halves of that.
Thanks again for joining. Subscribe so you can see when we have this lovely guest back on in the future or whatever else we do. But until next time, remember, you've always got reason to doubt.
Peace out.